There was a time to where the disciples, they came and they asked Jesus about the end of times. And to understand Jesus' answer, we must remember not only who Jesus was, but who he was speaking to, which were all Galileans. And in order to understand how and why Jesus will return, we must turn our attention to one of those Galilean customs that Jesus referenced when he began to tell them about the end of times. And one of these customs that was extremely unique to the Galileans, more so than the other regions around them, and that was a Galilean wedding. A Galilean wedding. We're right smack dab in the middle of wedding season right now. How many of y'all know we live in different seasons, right? Amen. All right, this is wedding season. All right, here at the beginning of September, for anybody that's wanting to wonder, wedding season ends and then football season takes over. So I'm just telling you, it's a joke, y'all can laugh. I've actually got to do a wedding during football season, and I did several, and they've all been a blessing. But this Galilean wedding, it was different than any other wedding around it. First off, when we begin to talk about this Galilean wedding, we need to keep in mind that in those days, a wedding was the most important event, and it was normally celebrated by the whole city. Not just the family and friends, but the whole city came out to celebrate. And it started out kind of much like our current, wedding process takes place. It started out with a betrothal, okay? Which is what we know as an engagement or a proposal. And at this time, the whole city would gather to witness this. And there would be a written contract which would be read aloud after being agreed upon by both families. And the bridegroom would then take a cup of wine and he would offer it to his proposed bride. Now, you say that women don't have power. This says otherwise. Because right now, during this part of the process, when the bridegroom came up and he offered this cup to the bride, she had power right then in her hands. Because she had the power to accept his proposal or to reject the cup altogether and say, no, this wedding ain't going to happen. And just put an end to everything. Now, if she did indeed accept this proposal, what she would do is she would drink from this cup. She would drink this wine. And after she drank, she would give the cup back to the bridegroom. And he would drink from the cup. And what this did is this solidified the new covenant that had just been made. After this, after the bridegroom drank, he would proclaim publicly and loudly to the bride, and this is what he would say. Pay close attention to this. It says, "You are now consecrated to me by the laws of Moses, and I will not drink from this cup again until I drink it anew with you in my Father's house." That sound familiar to anybody?
Yes.
It does, doesn't it? See, Jesus did the same thing at the Last Supper. In Luke 22:18, he says, "For I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes." He then mentions the new covenant in verse 20. He says, "Likewise, he also took the cup after supper, saying, This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you." See, a lot of times we view this as just, sitting down and maybe supper time and we're all sharing a meal because it's called the Last Supper. But what he was telling the disciples is that they were one with him and that he would be leaving, but he was going to return again. See, the custom of eating from the same bread and drinking from the same cup was known in those days as a common union. So you put the two together and you get communion. All right? That's how communion started. But it wasn't just the Last Supper. This took place during these wedding ceremonies. And so during this Last Supper, when he performed this, with Galileans, they were thinking wedding in their minds. They were thinking a union of Jesus and them. And in order to have a union of them and it being a wedding, there has to be a relationship. See, that's why we have to have that relationship with Jesus Christ. That's why it's extremely important that we understand that we are to be one with Him. And that when we receive Jesus and we're baptized in His name, we take His name when we go down in that water, that we are combined with Him and we are one. And that's why we want His light to shine from us so that all people can see. See, when the disciples, when they were taking part of this Last Supper, that's exactly what they were thinking, was that wedding. And the reason that He did it was so that they could understand. They could understand what was happening. Now, this is why also that if you go and you study in the book of Matthew, that the disciples, one thing you'll notice is the disciples, they didn't ask Jesus why He was leaving, because after this, they knew exactly why He was leaving. But they asked Jesus when He was going to return. See, they were concerned about the when. And that's a question that still people ask today. When's He coming back? When is His return? And I want you to know this morning that if we get so caught up in the when and trying to figure out when He's coming back, we'll forget that, on the other end, that we're supposed to be preparing for His return. We'll forget our job. We'll forget what we're supposed to be doing.